Hey, book pals, this is Kirsten with The Spine of Motherhood, and I'm so happy you chose to listen to the podcast today. Two friends together talking about books. What could be better? So grab your drink, get cozy, and happy listening. Hey, book pals, welcome back to the podcast. And today we have poet and writer Josh Benzo Frank. Josh, do you want to talk about yourself? Introduce yourself. Sorry.
I'm Josh, or I write under Benzo Monroe, not necessarily as a pen name because everyone knows my real name. Um, Bad decisions. But yeah, I'm a poet mostly, I guess, and a writer, and sometimes artist and whatnot. But that's about all I do.
That's not true. You do lots of stuff, but that was a great introduction. I struggle with introducing myself, so I think you did great. And also, what are you currently drinking?
I am drinking an Alani
Ooh, a flavor.
cherry slush,
Yum. Yeah, that's a good one. Uh,
and I have a water.
there
What
you
about
go.
you?
I'm glad you're staying hydrated. I have just a water. I had my cold brew ready to go for this chat, and then I drank it while I was on the phone with um, a friend before this, so just water. What are you currently reading if you're reading anything at the moment?
Um, I am still trying to finish Galapagos by Kurt Vonnegut. You
Vonnegut.
pronounce it
Yeah,
Vonnegut. I try to overpronounce it.
yeah. Vonnegut.
Um, I love it, but it's hard to because I took such a long break. All the characters in it, it's like
Oh, yeah.
a memory challenge. And I just got a bunch of random like poetry collections and stuff, so I'm slowly working my way through those.
That's awesome. I know you said you got that one from Samuel Beckett.
Yeah,
That's cool. I've been on a big, and that's perfect for this conversation because we're talking about poetry. April is National Poetry Month, and I've also been on a big poetry kick. So the last couple things I've bought myself have been poetry things. So that's really cool that you're adding to your collection. I can't remember the last poetry I got was probably from McKay's. I got like random stuff.
yeah,
Um, but that's what we're talking about on this chat. I know that's probably like for people listening, uh, we're going a different way because usually it's horror, but I love poetry and you love poetry, and I feel like
yeah.
poetry needs more focus than it gets sometimes. Um, so I think it's a good thing to chat about.
Absolutely, because people hear poetry and they just think the flowery stuff you learned in school, and that stuff definitely has its merit, but that's not the whole
No,
genre.
no, and there's horror poetry. If you like horror, there's horror poetry. Um, if you like stuff that's darker, there's stuff like that. Like, yeah, I think people think of this is a good example. I had a poem I wrote for my daughter, and I had her read it, and she read it, and she just looked up and was like, "It doesn't rhyme," and I'm like, "Dude,
I've
poetry."
gotten in arguments with people about that.
Like, it doesn't mean it's not poetry because it doesn't rhyme. Although rhyming poetry, I find is I feel like it's really hard to do that because I can't think of words that rhyme. It even like, for example, Emily Dickinson, I think of her as like the queen of slant rhyme, and I think slant
Oh,
rhyme
absolutely.
it's even harder to slant rhyme than it is to regular rhyme. So there's a lot of like merit in that in rhyming poetry and regular poetry, the flowery poetry. I love
Oh,
some of
absolutely.
it too. But if you don't like that, there's tons of other poets that put out stuff that's not that is the point. So today we're going to talk about that, and I thought it would be a good opening to talk about how each of us got kind of into poetry or where we feel like that began as an interest for us. So if you'd like to go first.
So, like I said, in school, it was always the same stuff, but Edgar Allan Poe was cool. obviously. Robert Frost, I liked him, but then there was a lot of just random stuff I wasn't really vibing with. And I don't remember. I want to say there was a band that was really popular back then called Hot Water Music, and that's named after a Charles Bukowski book.
Yeah.
So I think one of us in the friend group got that book and a collection of his poems, and I immediately gravitated towards the poems. And also, I was a big punk rock kid back then, and I learned Henry Rollins from Black Flag, which obviously I've ripped off that design for a sticker recently.
I love
Um,
it.
and I found out he used to write poetry. Now he normally writes like travel journals and stuff, but his poetry was cool too. So, and very blunt. So I kind of got into more of that style. That's what made me more fall in love with it.
I love that. I like the point you made, kind of connecting, the music scene and poetry, and not that it was like a direct correlation, but I was thinking about it earlier, like how I would talk about what really got me into poetry. And before I even started to like read poetry collections, so maybe late preteens, early teenage years, before that, I was writing like songs,
Yeah, me too.
and that in itself is poetry to me. And so making my own songs and my song lyrics when I was like 10 and then recording them on like a little tape recorder thing, which is so cringy. But that is probably where I really honestly got my first love of poetry from, was music.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I don't know if a lot of poets like make that connection, but I do think music and poetry were kind of one and the same for me at the beginning. Um, and then of course when I was like a preteen, I got into like the kind of frou-frou poetry, like Shakespeare and Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Then it morphed into like Walt Whitman, Allen Ginsberg.
oh, I love Ginsberg, but
Yeah.
I found him through the Burroughs connection. But
Oh yeah. No, I think mine was like me. So this is probably also another connection, but when I was like a early high school years, I was obsessed with quotes. I still am. But I
yeah, me
went on a
too.
spree of finding all these quotes, and I would find a quote from somebody, and I still do this too. I know I do this, but like I would find a quote from someone and I would research that person and start reading whatever they wrote. So, um there's a Allen Ginsberg quote about don't hide your moonlight or something, your madness. Um and that really hit me, and then I was like, that's how I got into Allen Ginsberg. Um
Yeah,
so from maybe 10th 11th grade, that's when I got, okay, now I'm like learning different poets and branching out, and yeah, but I think music was, and writing lyrics and writing songs was how I was like, I like doing this.
I think that's when I started writing it, because I would write stories and stuff, but never really poetry until I got more into music. And I would try to write lyrics, like the bands I liked, but in my own way. And it's just kind of progressed from there.
Yeah. I think it's cool to think like if you had to describe your poetry style as a music style, what would you say it most resembles?
Um, I don't know.
I think there's, personally, your poetry, there's some like rap esque elements,
Oh, yeah,
and
absolutely,
then
yes.
also that kind of like punk vibe as well. So some kind
Yeah,
of amalgamation of those two, I would say.
like when I try to get in writing mode, I don't know if you have a certain genre or what, you have different music you listen to for different modes. I'll listen to music to get in the mood to write. And a lot of time it's just like trap music, normally southern because that seems to be with what I vibe for more, and like emotional hardcore, like old school scram, screamo, whatever. A lot of dispute, obviously.
I love that. I don't I'm one of those people that it's hard for me to listen to music directly before I write, because I feel like if it impacts my writing too much.
Yeah.
My kids are being so loud. They're arguing like at full volume. But yeah, so if you guys listening hear that, that is my children, and they're fine. They're just very loud. No, but yeah, I think my poetry is more like kind of I don't know what kind of music it'd be like, sad Bon Iver type music maybe.
Yeah.
But I feel like when I'm in the zone, one random thing will like inspire me, and then I'll get into my head and like twirl that around and let it marinate. But if I listen to music, it changes kind of like the mood I'm in, and because I don't know, I soak it in, I guess. Like I absorb the feeling of the music, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely.
So I'm kind of jealous of people because I have friends that write while they listen to music, and I couldn't because it would just take me out of either what I'm doing or it would affect what I'm writing too much to listen to music while I wrote. Yeah. So, but I just thought it was interesting to think of that connection between music and lyrics and poetry. And there are some songs, especially rap, that I hear the lyrics. I'm like, that is just straight up poetic, you know?
I
Um,
know you and I sometimes will do that. We'll send each other lyrics we think would be an awesome poem.
yeah, yeah. And
Like
it happens a lot.
every time I die, it's like a hardcore metal band, but their lyrics are probably the like if they put out a book of their lyrics, I would buy it and it'd be just amazing.
Yeah, I could see that. Um, and so I think that's if you're struggling with poetry and not like enjoying it, maybe think of it as like in a musical sense and then try to find maybe poets that fit that kind of musical style you like, and I think it would make it more enjoyable. It just if you're struggling with that. Um so yeah, that's how we both got into poetry, I suppose, and I love that we have that shared thread of music and lyrics and all that that brought us to poetry. And now I wanted to ask like I guess we could go back and forth. That's what I usually do. Some poets you like right now or your all-time favorite poets, whichever you want to do. I figured we could both talk about that. So if you wanted to go first, I would love that.
All right. One of my all-time favorites is Reagan Butcher. Obscure name. He was like a punk poet. He quit writing poetry and now mainly writes chupacabra fiction. And I haven't read that, but I imagine it's probably good because he's a very good writer. But his stuff was mostly written in prison. Um, I think it's still in print through him, but it was originally released through like an anarchist collective called Crime Think. But I really vibed with him when I first found him. I think he only put out two collections and a chapbook, maybe. But I know I sound like a hipster right now, but that's probably my favorite poet of all time.
No, I love that though. I've never heard of that name before.
Yeah,
Now
I
feel
feel bad. My favorite poet is like someone so obscure.
no, no, don't feel bad because I mean I think that makes it more fun because now I have to go look them up. So, okay, so I have to look into Butcher now because I've never heard of him. So thank you for sharing that. I guess the first one I want to talk about that I'm loving right now is this is not someone I've known for a long time, only recently ish, but I am obsessed with, and that is Sappho. And it's because I think Sappho, that's like 1630 BCE.
Yeah,
So very long time ago. And she is like I think that's where the term sapphic came from.
yeah, and she was from like Lesbos or
Lesbos,
something.
yeah. So she wrote mostly about women and also love and between women. So I think that's why they named literature that features women together and relationships and such is Sapphic. And now Sappho's kind of almost like legendary. Um, and now I think the Hellenistic period, they said basically Sappho is canon, and she's one of the 9 lyrical poems worthy of study. So there's a lot. It's kind of sad because back then, things weren't documented or written down as well. So a lot of Sappho's poetry is fragment, and I think they have to do a lot of study and research to figure out what's her, what's not, that kind of thing. But I have the Stung with Love, and it's poems and fragments from Sappho. I highly recommend if you just are in like a kind of subversive and a little erotic poetry mood. I really, really enjoy Sappho. And I think the fact that it's kind of more mysterious because it was so long ago, that it does make her seem kind of mythological in a way. So if you haven't read Sappho's poetry, a lot of them are like very short little fragments, and I think they're beautiful. So I know you know who Sappho is and probably have
Yeah,
read some of her work, so you know what I mean.
yeah. It's honestly, it's just beautiful.
Really, it really is.
If you can deal with the old language, I know some people have a hard time with that, but it's not super dense.
No, I don't think so either. And I don't think any of it's like written in a way that's like too hard to understand. Um, but yeah, just very beautiful and definitely worth checking out. If you like, if you like mythology or Greek mythology, that kind of vibe. Sappho obviously was a real person, but I think it falls into a similar kind of energy or vibe. So yeah, that is my first one I wanted to talk about. Do you want to mention the next poet you're loving?
Um, it's weird, but Camp Fear by Tom Bland. It's almost a poetry collection, but it's also like a poetic novel. It could really be read either way. It's transgressive, just queer poetry, and I don't know. It's weird in the small area we're in of the writing is so many of the people you admire become like friends.
Yeah,
So it's weird shouting them out, but yeah, Tom Bland is a friend, but I read his writing before we were friends,
I love
and
that.
it's definitely inspired by like some of the like uh I'm gonna probably mess up this name, but like Anton Artaud,
Mm.
some of his writings. He's the one that did like a lot of writings about the theater and stuff and how that was changed in France.
Huh. Yeah, I haven't read Bland yet. I feel like I've heard you mention it or
He also blurbed my collection
oh yeah,
too.
that's where I've seen the name. That's awesome. And so you said it's like he writes transgressive and it's queer as well.
Yeah.
That's cool. I love queer any kind of literature, but especially poetry is amazing.
Oh yeah, me too.
That's awesome. Okay, so which work did you say you recommended from Bland, or did you
Camp Fear.
Can't Fear? Okay, I'll have to add it to my list now. I love that he blurbed your collection too, though. Yeah, I wanted to talk about someone who actually also blurbed my collection that's coming out soon, next, and that is Anton Cancre, who is one of my really good friends, and he wrote a collection that I want to talk about specifically because it's so freaking cool. And I love when people have literature that is inspired by movies, when
Yeah.
kind of art takes from other art and however form it may be. So Anton recently published Let the Sun Shine In, which is poems torn from the dead flesh of The Autopsy of Jane Doe. The Autopsy of Jane Doe is one of my favorite movies that I've seen in the last couple years. And all these poems are inspired by that movie, which is so cool. And so, yeah, I'm looking at it right now just because I'm like, I know there's little art pieces in here. But anyways, so Anton, I would say writes kind of. So he has this poetry collection. He has one that's like Silent Hill inspired.
Yeah, I saw that.
Um, and then he has just some other ones that are just very, like, I would say he has weird poetry, which is I love. Definitely very heavy in emotions and feelings and mental health, which a lot of poetry is, but it has this very unique flavor of like the kind of weird um outer fringes of society type of vibe that I love. So, and I think I just love Anton as a person. And he's my friend, so it's hard because I'm like, he's so talented and I love him, but he's also been on the podcast before. So, that's awesome. But yeah, if you loved The Autopsy of Jane Doe or Silent Hill and you would love poetry that's inspired by those movies, check out Anton Cancre. He's a very talented poet. So that is my next one. All right, you go next with yours.
All right. So one of my favorite collections I've ever read was only put out in 2018, 2020. It's called I'm Not Your Final Girl by Claire C. Holland. It's it's like horror feminist poetry. So each poem is like titled after a movie, and she kind of writes from the perspective of the final girl in that movie, but not in like I'm gonna summarize the movie way, but like an emotional way.
Yeah.
I know she wrote it directly after the Roe v. Wade thing, so there's a lot of that feeling coming across and everything too about
Oh,
bodies and she equates it to like just horror movies and being a final girl in a horror movie, and it's just an amazing collection.
I love that. I think you've told me about it before, and I think I've seen someone else mention it. I definitely need to get it because I haven't read it yet. So that
I'm sure I have because I normally mention that one to people.
it's such a cool idea, and I love Final Girls. I love, feminist horror, pink horror, all that. So that sounds like perfect to add to my collection as well. So yeah, I got to read that one. It's I keep acquiring poetry collections and not reading them.
Yeah.
So um it's like becoming I just want to collect them, I think, which is good. It's good. It's just they're so easy to read. I should probably focus on reading
I,
those.
I do it too, though. Like, if I'm in a poetry mood, I'm going to buy a bunch of collections at once, if it's affordable, and then they just sit there because you know,
Life.
yeah,
Yeah.
life.
I feel that. Well, one day. I mean, I've read two poetry collections this month already. So I really hope to get a couple more read, but it's like what, the 26th. So, you know. But
Yeah,
the next one I wanted to mention is one of my so I will say Mary Oliver is like my go-to nature poet for the most part. I love Mary Oliver. But Mary Oliver is very well known. So I wanted to highlight someone who does nature poetry that's not as well known, and that is Jarod K Anderson. And he is the crypto naturalist on social media. So I'm sure a lot of people may know him from that. But the collection I have is called Field Guide to the Haunted Forest. And it's kind of like celebrating the natural world and the magic in nature. And yeah, he just has a way of talking about nature that is dark and a little bit creepy with a little bit of horror vibes, but then also in this like magical appreciation way. Um I just love it. So, if you also love nature and you like nature poetry, I feel like that's even more niche type of poetry that people are like, "Nah." But,
yeah,
if you like Mary Oliver and you know who she is, I think you would like Jarod K. Anderson. He is worth checking out. I think he has a couple of these little tiny ones, like the Field Guide to the Haunted Forest. I don't remember the names of the other ones, but yeah, he's awesome. Check him out, Crypto Naturalist on Instagram and Facebook, and that's my recommendation for that. But also read Mary Oliver if you haven't, because she has some beautiful poetry.
Yeah, she's really good. I haven't heard of the other one, but I will definitely check it out because I was never a huge nature poetry fan until you started sending me some, and now I'm super with it.
Yeah, it has its own vibe, and I love when poets kind of can talk about the dark parts of nature and our world and our planet, but also this like hopeful, beautiful side of it. It just hits for me. And for some reason, like I like poetry about love, but for some reason, the nature ones just are more relatable to me, and maybe just 'cause
Yeah.
I love nature. Yeah. So, anyways, Jarod K. Anderson and Mary Oliver. There's others, obviously, like you know Walt Whitman and Thoreau and people could think of for nature, but those are my favorites for that. So, who did you want to talk about next?
Sam Pink. He's a he's an author and he does poetry. He kind of was in that whole alt lit scene years ago, but his poetry is very it's funny, it's emotional, and a lot of it's just about the like mundane of life and the absurdism.
I love absurdism. So,
I
uh,
think he has one that's just a line, if I ever find a dead horse, I'm gonna beat the shit out of it.
what the heck? I love
Well, you
that.
know the term kicking
Yeah,
the dead horse.
beating a
Yeah.
horse. Yeah. No, I love that, and it's like wow, but also like kind of I I probably shouldn't laugh at absurdism stuff, but oftentimes I do, and I think that's the point is kind of to like laugh at life and existence. But
Oh, absolutely. That's how I view it because even the darkest parts of life, I can try to look at how ridiculous or absurd the situation is and make a joke out of it.
yeah, same.
That's kind of my how I deal with life in general. So finding a poet writing like that was just very it hit hard.
Yeah, no, I could see that. Um, I think not to delve too far into like other stuff that's not what who you just mentioned, but like when you're talking absurdism, that's why I like a lot of philosophers because
Yeah,
they have these like one or two liners that's really philosophy, but it can to me is like a poetry tidbit, and it's just so like painful and horrible to think about, but it's so true, and it's all that makes it funny to me. I
I
don't know.
think my favorite as far as that goes is Charon, I think his name is how you say it. He wrote like The Trouble with Being Born and all that. He mostly wrote philosophy, like I guess I don't even know what his school was, pessimism, nihilism, absurd, whatever, existentialism, something. But he wrote it in those short bursts. So some of them are only like 3, 4 lines long, and I almost read it more as poetry than philosophy.
No, same. I mean, I'm the same with like Kafka and
Oh, absolutely, Kafka.
Dostoevsky. I can never say his name correctly. And who else? Like obviously Camus and Nietzsche, and they have some like one line, two line, three line things that are just really like gut punches, and but they're like, wow, that's so depressing but realistic and also funny some way.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I'll add Bataille onto that
Oh
list
yeah, yeah,
just for me.
yeah. Yeah.
But you know.
Well, I mean, I think that Sylvia Plath falls in that, and Sylvia Plath does have her own poetry. I have her collected poems right here that I was gonna maybe mention, but I feel like at this point, everybody that knows me is like, we're tired of
Yeah, I
Sylvia
have
Plath.
it on my coffee table too.
Like we know you like Sylvia Plath, we get it. But some of her prose or her just like diary entries read very poetic, and I think it's just how she wrote, and I love that. And a lot of them are like about life. They're just like observations about life, but they read
Yeah.
as poems.
Kafka's diaries are a lot like that too,
Yeah,
and just even his letters, they're just like they're not poetry, but they're poetry to
they
me.
are. Yeah. Well, and I think we kind of get hung up on poetry being very formulaic in a certain way. And I don't think that it has to be that way. And to kind of circle to your poetry, um, I have your collection here too. You write kind of short form poetry. I don't know if that's like the actual term, but kind of more of like the little quick gut punches.
Yeah.
They're not these long, some people write long, whole, like a narrative type poem. Yours do tell a story, I think, but they're like kind of bite sized. And I think a lot of mine are like that too. I have some longer ones, but I like I think that's why I like haiku so much recently, because you can just tell so much in a short time, and it's kind of like very satisfying to
Yeah,
me.
dog, you for sure got me into haikus.
It's cool because it's hard to do it.
You're really good at it though.
Oh, thank you.
I I did some just as like a joke and making
You
fun of like 90s pop culture, but
I think you did a good job too. And I know, okay, so technically, like, let me just, as someone who's in this scholarly academia part of this, I think haikus have to be a certain subject to actually be considered haikus. But I think that the form of haikus is interesting to take and write about other things. So whether it be like 90s pop culture or, um, being a sad bitch, which is some of mine.
me too.
I think they're typically haikus are like nature based. Um, and they're not always like 575. They also have to have like some other elements in them. But listen, I think any way you can take that and make it inspiring to your own writing, I think you should do it. I'm not a purist or a snob about that at all.
No.
So
I mean, we both love Taco Bell. That's not real Mexican food, so it's okay that we write not real haikus.
now I have to write a a haiku about Taco Bell.
I'm surprised I haven't yet.
I know about Baja Blast. Yeah, that's something I have to achieve now. But yeah, so I don't. Did you have anybody else you wanted to talk about very pressingly, or would it be okay to move into your collection?
Oh, no, that's fine. We can move on.
Okay, not because I'm tired, because I could sit here and talk about, I have like Dickinson here and Rilke and like a couple
Yeah.
other Langston Hughes. Um, so I guess I'll list those off, and if you have any others you wanted to just list off really quick and not, we won't go
Oh,
too deep.
actually, while we're on the subject of haikus, I got someone to mention real quick.
Okay.
Thomas More.
Uh huh.
He he typically writes like fiction,
Uh huh.
like transgressive queer fiction. Like honestly, I think he's one of the best doing it. It's very akin to like if people into transgressive fiction will probably know Dennis Cooper,
Mhm.
and I would say his stuff's on par with that. But he just put out a collection of haikus called "I Ruined Your Life."
Mhm.
That's really good. It's very gut punchy, and
Okay.
but yeah, he writes haikus for fun mostly, but his fiction is what he's most known for.
I have to look that up now because I love that title. I love I love queer, transgressive, and the haiku idea. Are they all written in that haiku style, or are they just some of them?
Yeah, I didn't even realize it till after I read it. I was like, "Wait a second, why are they all 3 lines?" And then I read one out loud. I was like, "Oh, okay."
What's his name again?
Thomas More.
Okay, I thought so. Yeah, I'm trying to I'm like
There's
immediately gonna Google it because
there's a few Thomas Moores, so
oh,
I'll
I'm
send you
sure.
something.
Okay. Yeah, you should, because I'm looking on here and it's like uh somebody that writes like soul therapy and the soul of sex, and I don't think that's I don't think that's them. But anyways.
No.
Yeah, so and I know like we both like Rilke. Uh that is another person I was gonna mention. I don't even know how to explain like his vibe. I don't know.
I
Like,
don't know, like, it's like, some of his stuff mentions religion, but even if you're not religious, it hits in a different way.
yeah, and I saw like personally, I tried to avoid the ones where he's talking about his like spiritual journey, because like I find some of it interesting, but overall, I don't really want to read about that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
So the one I actually have two. One is on love and other difficulties, and um, this one says they're love poems, and it's when he was writing like his most mature work. So there's like some explicit sexual. poems, but they also have like gentleness and passion and that kind of stuff. But like he says some things, or he said, because he's no longer alive, um, that I was like, holy mackerel, that's just like blowing me away. Like the observation of love and life and feeling. I don't even know. I don't know how to explain Rilke, but if you have the time and you want to learn, check out his poems.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
yeah, obviously I love Plath and Dickinson. I feel like it's very cliche to like either of those two women, but they
But
are
they're
so good.
popular for a
Oh
reason
yeah, no, if
and
yeah,
important for a reason.
yeah, no, I will admit that Dickinson is one I love on the surface, but I have to like break it down to really get what she's saying, and I love that. Um, because she's really smart about how she wrote poems. It's not always surface. It's rarely ever just surface level. So I think
Yeah.
if you haven't read any Dickinson since high school or whatever, it's a good time to go back and reread some and see it from a different light. Um, yeah. So those were my other ones I was going to mention, but I do want to take some time to talk about your collection because it recently came out, and I'm going to try to not be too like biased because obviously I wrote the foreword, read it early, and so I want to give you the time to kind of talk about what it is for you and a little bit about it, if you would.
Um, it's called A Condescending Wound. It's by Benzo Monroe, me. Uh, it's a lot of, it's like 55 poems, I think. But I write pretty short typically. And a lot of it's just been written on and off since like 2017 is when I put out my last thing.
Yeah.
And um, it's, but I tried to only put in the ones from that time period that fit together.
Yeah.
I didn't want it to be all over the place. So there's some stuff I wrote like the day before I sent it to like you to read.
Yeah.
And then there's some stuff from like 2018 in there.
I love that.
But it deals with mostly mental health, I'd say. Um,
Yeah. Oh, and there's like a kind of a unique story of how you got the title, right?
yeah, I was actually talking to you, and we were just joking around about something, and I said my emotional. I think I said something about my emotional scars, and then I was like, and these condescending wounds, just joking around with like wordplay and stuff, and it just kind of stuck,
Yeah.
really.
I love
Like
that.
honestly, finding that title is what made me motivated to even put stuff together.
It's exciting to have that I don't know, not to like take the focus away from you, but I can relate in that a while ago, like 2018, 2019, I was writing poetry down just sporadically like you. And in a notebook that I just wrote on the title, like notes on living and other such, um, I don't remember other such ridiculous stuff, something like that.
Yeah,
Just to be silly. And after a while, when I was like, I'm going to make a collection, I was like, why don't I just call it Notes on Living since that's what the notebook was called? And yeah, so I love when an idea kind of hits you like that, but it sticks with you enough that you use it for your work. But even if I didn't know that's where it came from, I think a condescending wound as a title wound fits the poems inside so well.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Because I like to be dark, but also have a touch of ridiculous or funny in there. If depending on your sense of humor, obviously.
Yeah, no, I think you do that perfectly. And the okay, so this is the cover. Again, I'll try not to be biased because obviously Matt is my friend. Matt Wildison did the cover for this. And was it like a pre-made and you just grabbed it up?
It was a pre-made. I didn't ask him like why he made it, but I assumed it was supposed to be for something body horror
Yeah,
related.
it
That's the
fits.
vibe I kind of got,
Yeah.
but it kind of also fit the vibe of my collection in a way.
Yeah. No, it fits super well. I totally see it being for body horror. I think that it fits your collection really well though. So that was a good choice on your part.
Also, someone that you recommended
Yeah.
me, and you added me to their cover group,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, cuz Matt did the cover for Curse of Medusa. Um
I love that one.
yeah.
So
And yeah, no, he's I know it's a struggle being in the artistic field in any way, whether it be
yeah.
a writer, an artist, cover artist, whatever, poet. And I think he goes through kind of phases where it's nothing's getting out to people, but I love it when a cover artist has a cover that just speaks to someone for something they're writing, and yeah, like you just snag it up and it fits perfectly. So it's a beautiful cover. I feel like I've seen a lot of people compliment
Oh yeah, for sure.
this cover, and I love the back too, how it looks on the back.
Oh, he killed it. I've like had people mention that specifically, like other writers and stuff.
Yeah, it's really well done and it fits super well. So, this is your second poetry collection.
Yes.
And do you feel like it was any different? Like obviously you're a different person than when you put out your first one. Do you feel like you've learned anything or changed, or what are the major differences in putting out this collection and your first one?
Well, my first collection, I was going through a really hard time. Um, and I put it out like zine style, like I copied them all myself, got the covers printed, stapled, did it like that. My writing definitely is a lot better now, and I feel like I'm more equipped now in my skills to have it more obvious when I'm being sarcastic or
Yeah.
facetious than I was in that one. Because if you read that one, you might think I'm just like one of the macho poetry bros. But
Well, I've read both, and um I can see they both have a similar, I don't know how to, because the styles are a little different, but they're enough the same that I can tell that you wrote both of them. But the place you were in being different mentally in your life is very obvious between the two collections, I think. Um,
yeah,
yeah.
the last one was more drug based and more like making fun of like the literature world almost in
Yeah,
a lot of them.
but that's maybe where you were at the time, and I mean, not that you are not still there sometimes, but now you have a different kind of lens to see the world and, everything from. Um,
Yeah.
so I think it's cool to, I don't know, like I know poetry's hard because a lot of people don't put out poetry collections like every year. That's not typically a thing, right? You put one out and then maybe years later you put another out or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, so that's, I don't know, that makes me curious to like look at other poets and see how their collections change over the years, because it's definitely with yours. I read your first one first, obviously, and I think you're a little nervous because you're like, some of that seems extreme, but it's not meant to be taken necessarily all at face value.
No.
Yeah, but I understood that, so I'm like, okay, I get where he's going with this. Um, but yeah, I mean, is there any other things you've felt like with this one? You had kind of more of a traditional experience, right? Like you had a cover, you had someone do forwards, you had blurbs. I don't know if you did that with your first one. You did everything yourself, right?
The cover was made by um Quentin Quay. I don't remember his last name, or I don't know how to say his last name. It's
Okay, yeah.
Quheys.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't know either.
Um, he is a really cool collage artist that I met through doing like harsh noise and stuff.
Okay, that's cool. I couldn't remember if you did the cover for that or you had someone else do it.
No,
Um,
I told him I needed a collage with nothing like super violent and no nudity, and I needed it to be this size. Do what you want.
that's cool. Yeah, that's awesome. Um, hmm. I was trying to think of like different things that are other than your mental state and who you are. I do think it's kind of shown like your progression as a person if you look at A Condescending Wound and then you look at your first collection.
Oh yeah,
Um,
for sure.
and your writing definitely. I feel like when I say your writing has improved, that people think I mean that their earlier work sucks, and that's not what I mean by any means. Because I enjoyed your first collection. I do think that you have changed how your writing style, and you have gotten better. Um, so I enjoy seeing that too. Um, yeah, and I enjoyed writing the forward. That was the first time I've ever written forward. It's kind of hard to do because you're like, how do you write a forward for somebody that's your friend or that you care about, and you not say like, "This is the best person ever." Like,
Yeah, I struggled with it too when I wrote mine.
yeah, it's so hard. Like, I would almost, not that I would regret doing it because I love doing it, but it's almost easier to write a forward for somebody you don't know, you know,
Yeah.
because then you're like, I'm not going to be basing it off of anything but what I just read. But I think it makes it more special too when you do know them. But anyway, so if you guys are love poetry, you should check out A Condescending Wound. But if you are just kind of like you don't know anything about poetry, I think you should still check it out. Especially, would you say this is transgressive? I don't really know like what falls under transgressive.
I would say definitely borderlines.
Okay. I just feel like it's very emotional and raw, and you're gonna feel the
And
feels. Yeah.
and even when I use like metaphors and imagery, which I do, I know I act like I don't, but I do it. It's normally dark, but
Yeah.
it probably represents something not as dark.
Yeah. No, I agree. And you can get it on Amazon, right?
Yes, Amazon. It's on Kindle Unlimited, Kindle, and paperback.
Awesome. Okay, so
And
everybody.
I always have signed copies too.
Oh yeah. Okay, so directly from you if they want a signed copy. I'll make sure I have like all your links to that in the show notes. But I do always want to ask people where, if someone wants to follow your work and your writing, where can they find you?
Um, I have a Facebook author page, Benzo Monroe. Um, I don't update it enough, but that's like the author type stuff. But I don't know. I feel like I share my writing and stuff more on my personal stuff. So on Facebook, that would be Josh Benzo Frank, or on Instagram, Benzo Monroe. I
Okay,
have a
yeah.
Twitter too, but I barely use
Oh
it.
yeah,
It's Benzo Monroe.
that's what everybody says about Twitter. They're like, I have one, but yeah. I think personally I see you post more often on your Instagram. But I if you
Just
guys
mid selfies.
shut up. If you guys hear a rooster crowing in the background, that is because there's a rooster right at my window crowing. So,
Pikachu.
yeah, just pretend you don't hear that. He's like, if he hears anybody making noises, he has to come tell them that he can hear them. So that's what that is. So finding you on Instagram or Facebook. Anywhere else you post stuff? I know a lot of people have like, I don't think you did have like a Substack or anything like that, but
I've toyed with it,
I
but
have two. I'm just so lazy,
I
honestly.
that's what mine is too. Like I've thought about starting like a Patreon for all, like start getting back into my like little story time videos and stuff,
Oh
but
yeah. Well, maybe one day one of us will try it and then we can let each other know the experience. But I know a lot of people use Substack and other type of like subscription blogs, so I thought I would ask. But anyways, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about poetry or your poetry before we got off here?
one thing I just noticed that I think is very funny, it's poetry month, right?
Yes.
Your collection is coming out next month,
Mhm.
and my collection came out last month.
Yeah. I don't
So
know.
we both kind of missed it.
Yep, we missed the memo. Um yeah, I really wanted to get it out in April, but honestly, like I didn't feel ready. So it just was like, it'll be in May. It's fine. Like, if
I'm really excited for yours, by the way.
thank you. I'm
Like
very
I was
excited
able to
too.
read it, and it's a great collection.
Thank you. I don't think I fall into any kind of like specific niche with my poetry, and that's I think kind of can be detrimental because it's kind of all over the place. But it's I always wanted to have a poetry collection, like, since I was little and started writing poetry. So now I will, and that's exciting. Whether I'll do any more in the future, I probably will because I've already written, like, more poetry since I finished this collection. So I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
I have to make another collection eventually. But the sad thing is that poetry just doesn't do as well as fiction, as regular fiction. Like, people don't get it as much as they do writing a novella
No.
or, whatever. So it is kind of a lonely aspiration to be a poet. I think you kind of understand that too.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But I enjoy it and I enjoy reading other people's poetry. And I'm really glad that I had you, of all people, come on here and talk with me about poetry because I know we both have that love of it, no matter how lonely it can be, that we're going to always write poems because it's just, I think, okay, this is so cheesy, but I have a poem in that my collection that's like basically the gist of it is like life is so hard and I feel so sad all the time, but at least I will have poetry to write about it. Um, and that's kind of how I feel. Like as long as I'm living, I'm gonna have poetry to write because life is so fucked up sometimes. And
I'd equate it to what you said about writing music. Like when you're writing music, you get that one line in your head.
yeah,
Or even when you think about a song, you get that one line in your head.
yeah,
And it just repeats till you do something with it. So that's
yeah.
kind of what my poetry is, and I know yours is kind of like that too.
No, yeah, no, and that's most of my poems start with someone will tell me something or I'll see something or experience something, and it just like one part just stays in my head and it won't. It's like a worm. Um, so I was thinking about John Donne or Dunn or however you say that poet's name, and I was thinking about this line from his writing where he said that like every man can't be like an island unto themselves. I don't know why I was thinking of that, but like I was like, dude, this will not get out of my head. So let me write this down and see what it's trying to tell me. Um, yeah, that's how like most of my poetry works. And so it's a fun process, I think, but that's kind of how my regular writing works too. Like
Mine too.
with Medusa, I just was like, man, I'm so pissed about how fucked up her story is, and it's so unfair. And it just wouldn't leave my head alone until I was like, I have to write this.
I think that might be another you and I thing between our conversations. Like we were sending each other Medusa art one day.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, I don't think I necessarily credited you, except in the end, I was like, because you helped early read and stuff. Um, but the quote that I feature at the beginning of Curse of Medusa was from you. And I kind of had toyed with what quote I would put there. I was like, maybe a feminist quote or whatever. But that quote, like, just felt so perfect for the story. So yeah, it's it's
I
it's fun to be inspired by other artists and other writers when you're.
and I actually got that quote from like, well, you and I send quotes anyway. That's like our fun thing we do. We send each other sad quotes. But I got that because like just the perfect time because it was around Halloween and my friend had dressed up as Medusa
Oh, I love that.
and she put that quote on her Instagram. Ramona Rotten, the one that did my uh, Black Flag ripoff sticker,
Yeah, yeah,
it
yeah.
was her. She's actually a play director in Chicago.
That's so cool.
Does a lot of like indie and queer plays and stuff.
I love that. I feel like you should connect her with Lindsay.
I should.
Because Lindsay does, acting and plays and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's so fun that we're all like somehow in this creative space connected and inspired by each other. And another example of that, before I let you go, I know we could yap forever, but another example of that, how we're all kind of connected and we get inspired about each other, because you've done it for me with Medusa and tons of other stuff. And then my friend David is reading, I think, Josh Mallerman, which is like a big, that's not an indie person at all, but there's a quote he had about how tradition, I think it's Josh Mallerman, it could be somebody else he was reading, but tradition is just carrying around dead people's baggage.
Yeah.
And I don't know why the whole idea of like dead people's baggage, I was like, holy crap, that's really inspiring me for some reason. And so I started kind of writing a little idea of a poem about it. And I just think that's so cool when we can kind of, which is that, I don't know. I don't think it's plagiarism. I think it's like
No, I don't
being
think so.
inspired. Um, and I obviously try to quote or credit anybody that I use their direct things, like when I did the John Donne poem or whatever. But I think it's cool that we all can kind of share our creative thoughts with each other, and it kind of maybe gives us inspiration to do other stuff. Because I know you doing your collection of poetry has also motivated me to keep up with doing mine,
Yeah.
and vice versa. So it's been fun to. I know we're not publishing really near each other since mine's in May and yours was last month, but I definitely think we kind of fed off each other's energy with the poetry stuff the last
Oh,
couple months.
absolutely. And we we wrote the foreword for each other's things, so
Yeah. It's all connected, and I love that. Um, and I just like supporting poetry when I can, especially indie poetry, because that's an even harder place to be at, I think.
oh yeah.
Because the Mary Olivers of the world are not necessarily needing our help, but the little indie guys do. So, um, yeah, I think that's all I have to talk about. So if you don't have anything else to add, I wanted to say thank you for coming on here and talking with me about poetry and sharing about your inspiration and your collection and all that. I've enjoyed it very much.
Me too. We should definitely do it again sometime.
I
Maybe
love that.
like philosophical fiction or
Oh
something.
yeah. Or
I know we're both into that.
we could talk about, transgressive or absurdism. I don't know as much about those, but I would love to talk about those one day too. So
For
let's
sure. It was really fun. Thanks for finally inviting me on.
You're welcome. Actually, you were kind of like, "Hey, I should be on there with poetry." I'm like, "Yeah,
I'm
duh.
like
Why
a
did?"
vampire. I normally need to be invited in.
Well, I
And you've
don't
been
know
doing
why.
this for so long.
I
And I
couldn't
was
think.
just like finally worked up the nerve.
Oh, that's so
Like,
precious.
hey, I know we talk all the time, but can I do this?
You're like, please, sir. Yeah, no, I love it. I don't know why I didn't think of it. So I'm glad you were like,
I don't
hey,
either.
we could talk about poetry, duh. Like, so anyways, everybody go check out Josh/Benzo, and read A Condescending Wound. You will not regret it. A huge thank you to Benzo Monroe for being on the podcast today. Go read his collection, A Condescending Wound, and check out his other writing. And as always, happy reading.